Well, good evening. Welcome to our Wednesday Bible study. So last week I said we were going to be in Samuel, and I didn't tell the truth because I forgot about the books of Ruth and Esther that really do fit in the same timeline. So we're going to cover Ruth tonight, Esther next week, and then we'll do the surveys into Samuel. I do have the outlines in the back. And if you're not here tonight, if you want a handout, you can email me or give me notes, and I'll send me a note. I can get you the outlines.
Can you please let people know Lisa got out of hospital today and she misses everybody?
Okay, so Lisa got out of the hospital today. She's back home. Sounds quiet. And she misses everybody. Let's get going here. So I got the comments up, like I said, normally I do. So if you want to make comments through YouTube, if you're watching me right now, we can interact. We'd love to have you participate. So Ruth, if you want to turn your Bibles over to Ruth chapter 1, we're going to read a lot more reading tonight than we usually do, just because of the nature of the book, and it's a little different than just a survey. It's nice and short, but I think I think it's one of the most interesting books in a way, because it is just a beautiful transition out of the ugly time period of the Judges and shows us something of a glimpse in it. But before we get started, let's go and have a prayer. Our most blessed Father, we're very humble as we begin this evening of study. We're thankful, Father, for the words that we have written down and the books that we're able to study after so long a time. The lessons are still so valuable to us. We pray that you would be with us as we study tonight. We'd have our minds and hearts open, and that we would learn the needful lessons that we may need in our lives, that we can go forward with it and help to share it with everyone around us. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen. So like I said, when we look at the book of Ruth, one of the things that it's amazing is, well, there's a couple of things. One, it is during the timeline of Judges. It comes in during the period between Samuel, when the first king, whenever they finally get tired and they want to have a king, and then they go to Samuel. So, there's so many dark things about the time period of Judges that's so bothersome to me. You just walk away feeling like you need to go take a shower. It's just like, oh my. And it's just very depressing, but it's very powerful lessons, of course. But this period of Ruth is a story within that period of Judges. So that's what's important. And it comes right at and around, possibly, we don't know specifically, but we know Samuel is after this. And one of the beautiful things about her name is Ruth being friendly, meaning friend. And it does fit with that. Just kind of a map of the overlying geographical area there, kind of divided in the way they would refer to it. The northern kingdom, southern, there's not such at this time. They're still just independent tribes. They're kind of a democracy, not a republic. They're all independently run by the elders of those tribes, and we see that has not gone well. They're not following after God. They go through these periods of time, the cycles of faithfulness, sinfulness, punished, repentance, and then restoration. And this is the beginning of one we'll see that is the beginning of one of the punishments because of the condition that sets it up. So there's these chords that I kind of saw through this. Now I have 5 on there on my slide, but I cut them back just for time's sake. So we'll don't hold me to the number of ties. But when we talk about ties, I think of something that's weaved together like a rope, and I thought of Ecclesiastes 4, verse 2. And if one can overpower him who is alone, 2 can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly torn apart. There are elements in our relationships, and of course this is talking about, the power of our fellowship with each other. And this is also true, we see in this story, But there are elements within friendships as well that we see. And so I think that's a great lead in to look at this. And the first chord that we see that really comes across as we start to read this, we're going to dive in and read, is that chord of kindness. Now, the conditions are horrible at that time, what's happening and what causes them to do what they're doing. We'll discuss it a little bit, but let's go ahead and read 1 and 2, and we'll talk a little about it. Now, it came about in the days when the judges governed, that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the land of Moab with his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem in Judah. Now they entered the land of Moab and remained there. So we see the condition right away. During the time of the judges, 2 things show you what cycle are they in. We talk about that cycle, right? Well, there's a famine. So it's not a time of prosperity. It's a time when God is punishing. So that right there helps to really kind of almost tie exactly in where we ended with the book of Judges. We find that, the conditions are bad, so they decide we're going to seek a place that we can go and find food and not starve to death. We can talk about the reflection of faith. What do you do? I mean, there's a part of this where we can criticize, of course, and say, why are you going especially over to Moab? Moab is a place that is absolutely ungodly. They're not very friendly at all. But the other part, though, we see is this kind of reminds me of the prodigal son. Where the prodigal son, he thinks he needs to leave and go away, and he departs, but what happens? He ends up coming back. So the wife, the 2 sons, they travel over there to Moab and remain there. Now, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left there with her 2 sons. They took for themselves Moabite women as wives. The name of one was Orpah, and the other one was Ruth. And they lived there about 10 years. Both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and the woman was bereft of their 2 children and her husband. So it just gets worse. She loses her husband. She loses both sons. I know this type of grief, it must have been overpowering. I know that, because I know what my grandmother, one of my grandmothers went through. In 1 year, she lost her father, her brother, and 2 sons. 2 sons. And everybody she never did, but it broke her. I mean, she was just destroyed, and it reflected. I mean, I could see it in her spirit. She never recovered from that. And so that I can imagine what she's going through. First off, you make a decision to try to save your family, do what's right for your family, and then you go over there, and then your husband dies. The sequence seems to be that he dies, but the boys are still single. And then they marry Moabite women, which strike 2, right? Strike 1, you're going to Moab. Strike 2, they marry Moabite women. So everything seems to just be collapsing in. And then it says, they were there for 10 years. Total bereavement, total vulnerability. Think about the role and the way women were treated and their influence on society and such. Extremely, and especially, she's a Hebrew. She's not from Moab. So she is even in the worst situation than ever. Then verse 6, then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the land of Moab. For she had heard in the land of Moab that the Lord had visited his people in giving them food. So she departed from the place where she was, and her 2 daughter-in-laws with her. And they went on their way to return to the land of Judah. So she hears that now the economics have changed. And I think it's almost like that's your sign. Go home. What you've experienced here is total loss. But we know she was also thinking about how horrible she was, how she felt about herself spiritually, because what's going to happen when I go home? She had to have been thinking about this. We know she was because of what she says later. And the whole problem of being destitute, returning back home, and all the peer pressure and the way people would look at you. So she's going back extremely humble. But she's got these two daughter-in-laws that are Moabitess, and they initially start to go, but then Naomi, in verse 8, stops them. And Naomi said to her two daughter-in-law, "Go, return each one of you to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and me. May the Lord grant that you may find rest, each in the house of her husband." Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. She realizes taking back two Moabite women is not going to be good for them. It's not good for her to stay there, but it's not going to be good for them to come. And she has a lot of logic to us, but you notice her kindness and looking at their future. Your future is going to be far more assured by you staying and going back to your house, and then from there, they can take care of you, and then you can marry. And I love the way she brings up, "May the Lord deal with you kindly as you have dealt with the dead and me." The dead being their husbands. You dealt kindly with my sons. So it's not that she doesn't care about them. And you can see the emotional bond they have. She kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. They'd grown. The one thing that you start finding in relationships is that when you start having tragedies and you share them, they're bonding. And what they have gone through, these three women, has caused them to bond closer with one another, because everything that they all lost, think about it, every one of them lost their husbands. And they grieved in their deaths. And so there's a bond there that you share as well that supersedes race. There's, or culture or anything. There's a human bond that's just so powerful and dynamic between these women. But they don't want to part. But she says to them, she said to her, "No, but we will surely return to your people." But Naomi said, "Return, my daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Return, my daughters. Go, for I am too old to have a husband. If I said I have hope, if I should even have a husband tonight and also bear sons, would you therefore wait until they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, it is harder for me than for you, for the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me." So we can already see a broken spirit, right? And it's, you notice when she was sending them back home, she saw hope for them, that they could go back within their own race, their own people, and find husbands, find security. But now you're going to be a Moabite in a Hebrew land that the men are not supposed to marry foreigners. So she knows it's far worse. No, you need to go home. I care about you. That's the right thing to do, to care for you. And they lifted their voices and wept again. But Oprah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. Then she said, "Behold, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." So Ruth's holding on. Oprah's, okay, I understand. There's nothing bad with Oprah. There's nothing wrong with her making that choice. But Ruth is not. And this is where we see that cord of loyalty, the next cord of loyalty in a relationship. Kindness can attract a person, but, loyalty is something that enables a relationship to endure. I have a friend that he's a friend of the family, and he, no matter what has happened, he has been loyal. And it just blows my mind. It's created a tighter bond between us. than ever because of that. And that's something that, you can be kind, you can be friend with general people and have friendships, but when one will go through the hardships and willing to sacrifice their security in the future for her mother-in-law, knowing what she's facing is what the challenge is going to be for her. It's going to be hard enough for Naomi to come back. She's coming back to nothing. But it's not going to be even harder for her. One, Naomi's probably thinking, I'm already old. I'll go back, I'll be destitute, but I'll eke out a living somehow. But you're young. And I die, that's going to leave you in a worse situation.
Yeah.
Because now you're going to be a Moabite. What's that?
In a foreign country.
Yeah, in a foreign country.
I was wondering if Naomi might be kind of leery of even bringing a Moabitess back into the land.
Well, that shows some loyalty back to her, doesn't it? The fact that she would go ahead, that she allows her to come.
Yeah.
I mean, she's already coming. It would be like hanging a sign on you saying, I went to Moab. Every time you walked into a market or somewhere, you had a Moabitess daughter-in-law. Oh, where's her husband? Oh, he's dead. Where's her other son? Oh, he's dead. Oh, he's dead. Why? In Moab. You can see all the religious people going. And then have Ruth with you is a constant reminder. She goes anywhere in public. And that's what I mean. This is such an amazing, powerful relationship that when you dig into it, you see this bond goes way beyond what you normally see. And so, we see that kindness that they have that has bound them all together, but then the loyalty is what carried really Ruth and Naomi's relationship even further. But I love what Ruth says. She pushes back, doesn't she? But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus may the Lord do to me, and worse, if anything but death parts you and me. Wow. This is one of Scripture's greatest covenant pledges. Because you don't see many that have in the Bible that have such a covenant relationship like they develop. And it's not one that's been written down, but it's one that is of true essence of their relationship and the way that she feels about her. And remember, this is a Gentile again. And this story is about how God's people and Gentiles, right? And that's what blows my mind is it's like when Jesus came and you see all the conflict and all the prejudice between the Jews and the Gentiles and how difficult a time they had in realizing that the blessings were for everyone, yet here is this story that they had to have read. They had this book. And here is a glaring example of a Moabite woman.
But Naomi did not want to go back. Ruth did not want to go back as Naomi thought to the gods from the Moabites. She wanted to worship the God that Naomi worshiped.
That's right. She wanted to worship the gods of Naomi. And now, if you were Ruth and all you knew is the gods that you raised with and the result of a life lived under those gods, and then you saw this Jewish woman and the result that her God has done for her, and you had to choose which one is better.
She saw which one was better.
Ruth
saw which one was better.
How? What did she see? She saw her destitute place, her wife going, that's what I mean. She has no...
If they had their husbands, I'm sure she felt taken care of.
She probably did, yes. That's true. But as far as like the external pleasures of the world, but it's the moral character, right? That she probably saw that they had. But as far as like if the way people pick, well, I picked this church because they have this for me, right? This church does a lot. Well, that church, there's only a few of them. They don't do anything. We look at what gods have done, been the best from Ruth's perspective. If she was to say like she does here, may my God will be your God. And all she has is faith. Faith in what she's seen in the character, but nothing in the physical world that would say, you're going to have it better than I have it with my gods. Her God hasn't shown, honestly, anything to give, like, oh yeah, man, they're rich with milk and honey over there. Everything those Hebrews do over there is blessed. No, look at the drought they went through. Look at what they've experienced. So, she's going way beyond it. And I think it was the character. I think you're right, Becky. The character of Naomi was different. The way that Christians with good moral, sound character has a different attitude, a different experience, the way we treat people. And that is something that does shine. That's a part of those excellencies that the world sees. So you're right. I think she saw that in Ruth. But it wouldn't have been by measurement according to riches or blessings externally that one God produced over her gods. So she had some faith in Naomi. So when she sees that, and when she saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. She gave up. That's okay. So they both went and they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, all the city stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" She said to them, "Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me." So we can see, right, her and she probably feels the guilt because they shouldn't have left. So she remains, even though there's nothing. Ruth, was such a comfort as well.
But Naomi was thinking that God was against her because her sons and husband died.
Mm-hmm. Some people think that, don't they?
Look what God has done to me.
Yeah, it's personal. Uh-huh. But this whole time, the Lord has blessed her with Naomi, with Ruth. She had 2 wonderful daughter-in-laws. This is where your faith and trusting that God's going to take care of you, regardless of the trials and the things that we're experiencing. We can look beyond that and understand what is greater to focus on, and that is God is still good. And maybe he did. Maybe he allowed that to happen to you, and that helped. But when it happened to you, what did you do? You came home. Like the prodigal. When the prodigal finally realized, you know what? I'm better off as a door servant in my father's house than sitting out here feeding defiled pigs. And then she goes on. She says, "I went out full, but the Lord brought me back empty. Why do you call me Naomi? Since the Lord has witnessed against me and the Almighty has afflicted me." So Naomi returned with Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, who returned from the land of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. So that tells us, that's going to set up. Because chapter 1 basically sets up the relationship. Chapter 2, then we find where Ruth then comes into contact with Boaz. Chapter 3, we see where, the Redeemer story. And then 4, when he goes and redeems, and then the end of it. So we're setting up the time and how she's going to end up finding this great Redeemer. So you look at Ruth, her loyalty to her family was with Naomi. She said where, she's loyal to where they're going to live, how they're going to live, and who they worship. She's ready to accept all of that. And so those are 3 ways that we see that loyalty came through. Like I said, nothing strengthens a relationship like a show of loyalty during critical times. A lot of people could say they're loyal, and maybe they will be. But when somebody is loyal during one of the worst moments in your life, that has a lot. That says a lot.
But God allowed this to happen in a time frame, the season of the harvest, and then this helped.
Yeah, it's setting. You can see it setting up, don't you? You can see during the time of the harvest, it's setting it up perfectly. But it's not going to come easy. There's a lot of work that goes into the rest of this, and that's what I think the third chord is, the word hard work. They're getting hungry, aren't they? They got to find a way to survive. And so starting chapter 2, now Naomi and had a kinsman of her husband, a man of great wealth, of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, please let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after one in whose sight I may find favor. And she said, go, my daughter. So now this is kind of an interesting injection of a family who is kin to Elimelech, Boaz, but she is not necessarily saying, I'm going to go to his field. Why we know is because when she comes back and she reports where she's been, she's like, oh, yeah, that's one of our kinfolk, right? Well, but look, because also here, Naomi's not saying, okay, I'm going to go to his fields. We just have an introduction that he's rich, that he's wealthy. It could be from anything. But it's setting it up in a way. But so don't think that, like Ruth is directing, Naomi is directing Ruth to go out and pick his field. Because there's providence throughout this whole book, the way God is bringing us out. Like you said, the timing of the harvest, everything about it. And so she wants to just go find a place that they will let her do this. When it says find favor, that they're not going to run me off. Because why? She's a Moabite. They would not have to allow her to glean off the corners of the field. That law was the law of Moses, and that was for the Hebrews. That's the way they looked at it. It actually did extend beyond. But you can see where she would be concerned that she's going to go out there. Now here's a woman, a foreigner, out by herself in a field. You can imagine the dangers that could be facing her from attacks.
I'm looking at it, she was on the outskirts of the field.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't allow her just to go in the field like what we see here with picking chili. It was really kind of pushed off to the side there so she could get a little bit.
Yeah, it'd be like it'd be like whatever crop fell off, the fruit fell off on the side of the road or stuff like that. We got the onion trailers. And man, they got to where they cover them up pretty good, but man, you could tell it was onion season because there would be these massive, beautiful onions all up and down Valley Drive. And I remember when we were a kid, we'd stop and pick them up, and they were delicious. And that was legal. But there's signs that say, don't go in the field, Yeah. So that was a part of the law, was that the poor could come to the edges of the fields and pick up after the harvesters have gone through, the reapers. So that's what she's doing. And I think that's where, Naomi may have guided her. Said, don't go in the middle of the field and pull stuff. But she knew, they allow poor people to go out to the outer edges. So that's what she's going to do. But that would automatically put her judged in two ways. One, you're destitute, you're a woman, and you're out here. Who else is around? And how is she going to protect herself? So she tells her to go. So she departed and she went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the portion, see what I mean? Happened. She didn't know. Happened to come to the portion belonging to Boaz, who was one of the family of Elimelech. Now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, may the Lord be with you. And they said to him, may the Lord bless you. Right away, we see something about his character. The way he greets his workers, alone, he's blessing them and they're blessing him.
He's not treating them like second class.
Right. He's treating them with respect. And the fact that they responded back, may the Lord bless you. If you didn't care about him, you would have said nothing. Or just nod. Yeah, how you doing? Oh, okay. But they give him a blessing in return. So, but like it happened. No, I think this was providential. It wasn't just an accident. This is the way God is guiding Ruth in this direction. Then Boaz said to his servant, who's in charge of the reapers? Whose young woman is this? The servant in charge of the reapers replied, she is a young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the land of Moab. And she said, please let me glean and gather after the reapers among your sheaves. Thus she came and has remained from the morning until now, and she has been sitting in the house for a little while. So right away, she just didn't start doing it. She went and asked, is it okay? And they said, yeah, you could see, but the other thing is she's been working all day. They're indicating she is really out there working hard. She's not just, lazily working, but right now. So then Boaz said to Ruth, listen carefully, my daughter. Do not glean in another field. Furthermore, do not go on from this one, but stay here with my maids. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Indeed, I have commanded the servants not to touch you. When you are thirsty, go to the water jars and drink from the servants' draw. Wow, he just opened up his heart and his everything, didn't he? He knew she's a Moabite, yet he's not seeing that. He's seeing somebody that is worthy, somebody that worked.
Probably beautiful too.
I think she was, yeah. Because he says, don't go to another field.
Yeah. He didn't want anybody to take advantage of her.
So that tells you something about the conditions, right?
Yeah.
That it wasn't all just safe. He understood the dangers that could happen if she was to take off and just go on to any field. But he could protect her.
Yes.
See, because he could tell his workers, which he did, one, let her eat. Let her go ahead and harvest, pick it up. So, and when you're thirsty, he's taking care of everything. Go ahead. Drink from the servant's draw. That's water that was hauled in for the workers during the day. So she fell down on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your sight that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? Boaz replied to her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband has been fully reported to me, and how you left your father and your mother and the land of your birth and came to a people that you did not previously know. He sees it, doesn't he? He sees it. He understands, you took a huge risk. You coming, and look at, remember, when he comes back from Bethlehem, he asks, who is that woman? And then they say, well, she's that Moabite woman that came back with Ruth. But I think he knew more about her from possibly going to Bethlehem. We don't know how long they've been there, but just because they said, who she was, doesn't mean that they gave her a full report. And maybe they did, but I think he knew a lot about what was going on with Naomi, and that Naomi was back, because Elimelech has some property, which is interesting, that you don't hear about, and it seems like that Naomi isn't doing anything with it. She probably can't, and it's just sitting. We don't know what's going on, but Boaz is a businessman. He's sharp. So he's going to know about what's going on around him. But it's been reported how you've given up everything and the kindness that you have shown to your mother-in-law, who are you going to show loyalty to? Usually your mother and father or your in-laws. Today, there's a few, but a lot of times it's going to be your parents, your bloodline, more than somebody that's just an in-law. So may the Lord reward your work and your wages be full from the Lord, the God of Israel. See the spiritual part immediately with Boaz. He's not going to do it for her, but he's saying, may the Lord assist you, help you, and bless you basically while this. And look, he even said, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge. Hold on and remember that phrase, under whose wings. That's a prophetic word too, as well. A usage is referring to the way God would describe himself and wanting to put Israel under his wing, like a mother hen. Jesus even says that. He says, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how many times have I wanted to take you under my wing and protect you?" And so he is describing this kind of beautifully. And then she said, "I have found favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and indeed spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I am not like one of your own maidservants. She identifies there that, and she has received a comfort that she feels like that she's not as worthy as his own maidservants. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come here, that you may eat the bread and dip your piece of bread in the vinegar." So she sat beside the reapers, and he served her toast and grain, and she ate and was satisfied and had some left. When she rose to glean, Boaz commanded his servant, saying, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not insult her." So you can imagine, you know, when he said insult her, it could be degrading words, basically, because she's a Moabite, the way that this racism could have been inflicted upon her.
Mine says reproach her. Reproach.
That's an insult. You're insulting, you're reproaching her, belittling her. But look at that. At mealtime, he brings her in and he feeds her just as an equal. But look at the little note here. She ate and was satisfied and had some left.
She was thinking of her mother-in-law.
Yeah, we're going to see where she's going to take that, right? And so, but he doesn't tell her that they're going to let her just get what she wants. He tells his servants, let her reap wherever she wants, and don't insult her. Also, you shall purposely pull out for her some grain from the bundles and leave it that she may glean, and do not rebuke her. There it is again. So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what had been gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. That's a lot, by the way. For one day, that's a lot. She took it up and she went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She took it out and gave it to Naomi, and what she had left after she was satisfied. So she even took a portion of her dinner. She could have been, man, I need to eat. I'm the one out here working. I need all the energy I can. But you can tell how that Naomi is first in her heart, that she's constantly thinking. When she comes back, she gives that grain and everything and shows Naomi. Her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today, and where did you work? May he who took notice of you be blessed." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, "The name of the man with whom I work today is Boaz." Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed of the Lord, who has not withdrawn his kindness to the living and to the dead." So, whenever somebody in your family has done something really wrong, a lot of times the hardest people to look in the face is your own family, because you feel like you've degraded the name, and
Shame them.
huh?
Shamed.
Shame the family, yeah. And so she's like, to the living and the dead. So she's referring to her husband and sons, that in a sense, his kindness is a reflection as well on her husband. Because think about it. He could be unkind because his Elimelech, the knucklehead, was stupid enough to go off to Moab, and so in a sense, he's showing honor even to those relatives that are dead that he's talking about, the relative and his sons. Then Ruth the Moabitess said, "Furthermore, he said to me, you should stay close to my servants until they have finished my harvest." Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his maids, so that others do not fall upon you in a field." See, there's that security issue, see? It was unsafe. So she stayed close by the maids of Boaz in order to glean until the end of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, and she lived with her mother-in-law. So she continues through 2 harvests, and they kind of overlapped, but there's multiple months in here that they work, and it's a lot of hard work in what she ended up doing. That's what I see in this. None of us have. I've never harvested that. I've seen, even people picking cotton and working out in the fields all day long. I mean, this was a lot of hard work that she went through.
Yeah, I looked at what Ecclesiastes does, and it's 20.8 quarts.
20.8 quarts. So she's starting to see, she's starting to feel the result of the providence of God. And many times, there's so many stories that you'll hear that people have gone through, and that it's the providence of God that has brought them through certain situations. And it's not that God sent you an email or a text message or an Instagram and said, hey, I'm doing this for you, but it's happening. It's happening all around us so many times. It doesn't have to be a miraculous situation, but God knows who are his, and he will provide the way. Maybe hard work,
He didn't say it was going to be free.
It wasn't going to be free. Yeah. So Naomi, the mother-in-law, now we go to 3, and then now we find the time when she's starting to guide her now to try to have her redeemed, basically, by Boaz. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose maids you were? Behold, he willows barley at the threshing floor tonight. Wash yourself, therefore, anoint yourself, put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known until the man is finished eating and drinking. It shall be where he lies down, that you shall notice that place where he lies, and you shall go and uncover his feet and lie down. Then he will tell you what you shall do. So now this just sounds weird, right?
Yeah.
I mean, today's standards. But it's not in this custom, in this day and age. And we already know that Boaz is an honorable man. He's told everybody not to molest her, not to bother her. He's taking care of her. I'm sure it's not because he's attracted to her to some degree. And there's a lot about the spiritual beauty in a person that far more radiates, than just the exterior. But you see his value is something. And that's why when we get to, I'm going to jump over, we see that she follows through. I'm not going to read all of that. She follows through, she waits till the evening, and then after Boaz has, eaten and drink, he lays down, and then she goes in and lays down at his feet.
She doesn't lie with him.
Not with him, no. She's not stimulating him and trying to seduce him. She's just there. Now, I don't know about you, but, and I don't know if they had sleeping bags like we have today, but, if you took your feet off and you were wearing sandals, your feet can get cold. And if your feet are cold, it's miserable. And I don't know. I tried to find that out if that was some reason. It'd be like, it sounds kind of weird. If you ever had a cat that sleeps with you, how warm they are, and they get on your feet. So I don't know, maybe there's something about that would, because it does. I mean, at midnight, he wakes up and he realizes, there's something different down, and he could tell. So it kind of startles him at first. And she says, and that's where she uses that phrase. She used that same phrase as basically the Redeemer language, the way she says about putting her under his wing. Let me get over there. In verse 9, he said, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. So she's not hitting on him. This is not this spreading of the wing. Remember, that's what he said earlier. This is the language of rescuer, of showing, I am willing to come under, submit.
Yeah.
If you look at the way little baby chickens are, it's pretty funny. But when they got a mother hen, the mother sits on them, right? And they get out and they will swoop them. They'll swoop them back under. They put their wing out. If they get attacked by a hawk or something, those wings are pretty stout. And it's just a beautiful imagery. And if you're not somebody who's been raised around animals, you wouldn't get the beauty of this. But this is a beautiful reflection of showing, I need help. and you're my redeemer. And now I wonder if there is a part where it is evoking, in a sense, she is reminding that you are a relative. And you are one of them, kind of like, what is it, like when you have children that are going to, if you die and the children are left in the custody, and if that person isn't alive, then it's the next person. A lot of times you list multiple people because you don't know if you die, if your children are going to have anyone. What if that person is not alive? You need other people, basically, to take over custody of your children and take care of them. Next of kin. So it's kind of a legal thing, but it's a beautiful thing, saying, and she's also, notice she's identifying it's like family. And she is, because remember, she was married to a Hebrew. So she does have that. She can say that. And so in verse 12, he says, yeah, it's true, but there's somebody else, though. He could have just jumped the line there. And, really, he could have just went ahead and said, okay, I will become your redeemer. But he knows that's not right. And I know, it's kind of like, you want to, but you know that the right thing is I have to follow up and let this go through. So this kinsman redeemer, there is another near relative that really has the right to the dead man's property and the dead man's family line. There's a responsibility to ensure that the family line would not stop. And so that's something that God had perpetuated through the law. You remember Tamar and Judah and his sons, they were evil, and God ends up killing them. And Judah goes to Tamar, why don't you wait? Because if you marry my next son, he's so young, he's going to get killed. You kind of get that feeling. So he then forgets about Tamar. And finally she has to do some rouge and, kind of ends up seducing him in a very shady way. And then he wants to kill her, and then come to find out it's Tamar. And then he realizes he's the one that's wrong. Isn't that interesting? This is the same tribe. Think about it. And when we read the end of the book, it kind of comes up. So here we have a situation where that responsibility is going to be fulfilled, whereas Tamar, because the descendants of Tamar ends up being the tribe of Judah and the descendant of the king seed. So I think the last chord is this faith in God. We'll see. So Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife. So I skipped over, sorry. So he goes down to the city and he basically finds the man who's supposed to be the redeemer and says, hey, Ruth, now this is what's interesting is, he should have known about Naomi. If he's up next to be the one to redeem, he should have been redeeming Naomi already. He should have already done it. He's obviously, come on, everybody in Bethlehem knew that Naomi had come back, Elimelech is dead, and you're next. And so whoever this guy, we don't ever get his name. It's kind of interesting, but we never get his name. So, but Boaz basically goes to the city council or the city elders and says, hey, this is what's going on. And he pulls the man aside and goes, look, you're the redeemer for Naomi. And if you're not willing to redeem her, then I will. And he goes, oh, man, I can't. What was his motive? His motive was, it's going to water down my inheritance to my blood. It's going to hurt my prodigies, that my children now are going to have to divide the wealth with Naomi, and I'm going to have to take Ruth, and to keep the genealogy going, I'm going to have to have kids with her, which is also then going to split out my inheritance and all my wealth, and my genuine children by blood, more closely blood related, they're going to lose money. Now, that's a whole different perspective from Boaz. It's like the way the world really responds. And so he does it. And I love that custom they had where a part of the transaction was whenever you made an oath like that and you accepted it, you take off and you gave your sandal. I love it. Now, what's interesting about that is the way that he says it, is the way it says it was a custom in that day. Which means, I think at the time of this writing, let me find it here. It says, now it was custom in the time, former times. See, in verse 7, it says, now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So he gave up a sandal. I wonder how he walked home. Give me your sandal? I don't know. I know, I think of weird things sometimes, but that's a strange thing. But he also, remember, he's got witnesses.
Well, it is an exchange of property. That's what I look at.
Man, if you ever had a household fight, she could say, yeah, well, I only got you for a sandal. No, sorry, that was... I'll get you a sandal, but... So it's just beautiful. I mean, it's kind of cool. And that's why I say I think it was something that may not have been going on at the time of the writing of the book, because it says that was something that was done then. It's almost like the author is explaining it well.
This is how we used to do it.
Yeah, this is the way they used to do it. Now, why we know that Ruth was probably written around the time of David. Why? Because they list the genealogy up to David. So if they wrote it before that, they wouldn't have known, David. So whoever the author was, we don't know who he was. It was at least written probably during the time of David. So at that time, apparently that had kind of stopped. And so he becomes his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed is the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name become famous in Israel. May he also restore to you to be a restorer of life and a sustainer of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her lap, and she became his nurse. The neighborhood women gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." So they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. So David's grandfather was Obed, and great-grandfather was Boaz. And so we end the book with the generations going back, and they list it. So this is another way we see, here we have a Gentile that's in the bloodline of the Messiah. So it's one of the greatest stories because we see this beautiful kindness in a very dark time in history of Israel, and yet God is working his providence and caring for people individually. At the same time, look at God working his plan to fulfill his promise of bringing a Messiah through, and how he blesses people as he's accomplishing what he had wanted. And so these are the chords that I kind of see throughout this beautiful love story. The chord of kindness, loyalty, hard work, and the faith in God. Any closing thoughts? Okay, so next week, Esther. We'll take a look at that. That's another one. That's another great book. That's a different time, but it's still historically, all this historical things around Esther is phenomenal. Some of the things that are said there. Okay, well, until we see you, hopefully you'll be able to make it down here to 9:45 Bible study this coming Sunday, 10:45 for worship, 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and back here Wednesday at 6 p.m. Until we see you again, God bless.